So, hi there. My name is Margarita O'Neal, and today I am doing an assignment for addiction psychology at Aspen University. And we're discussing a case study about a 24-year-old Hispanic male. So, what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to read the case study. I'm supposed to develop a treatment plan. I'm supposed to discuss some of the cultural considerations for the client, and then I am to upload this video from the outline that I have written. So Pedro is a 24-year-old single Mexican American male, and he's the eldest son of his first generation um, American migrant farmers. Pedro has some siblings. Anyway, from the case study that was presented to me by our instructor, um, this is what my finding is for that. Now, in talking about cultural considerations, I noted quite a few in my overview and how I laid out the plan. The only problem is that I also need to say that I am just assuming from what the case study said about who he is and what his upbringing is and what kind of family he comes from. The only problem with that is that I need to talk to him. I need to ask him exactly what his upbringing is, what his beliefs are, and what kind of environment he grew up in. Myself, I'm many generations here, Mexican American, and I grew up in the land of cowboy boots and Wrangler jeans and country music. Even though I do speak Spanish, a lot of the cultural background that people assume that I'm from isn't there because my family's been here for generations. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and discuss what I think should be the findings in this case study. So, cultural considerations. Pedro is a young 24-year-old Hispanic male who's the oldest son, first generation migrant farmer. This states to me that there's some expectations about Pedro's role in the family, such as he's the firstborn and he's the male role model, and he probably is carrying some financial responsibility for the family. Also, also it is um, an acceptable practice for Hispanic males to drink alcohol and to drink alcohol excessively. Um, Hispanic men don't like to admit that they have a problem. They don't like to ask for help. They don't like to admit that their life is out of control. Pedro was also in the military, which sends up a red flag to me that drinking was an acceptable practice throughout his military career. The fact that Pedro lost his hearing also says that he was removed from the military and that he might be feeling like his family is no longer proud of him. Um, Pedro probably feels like he's no longer a positive role model for his younger siblings, which could be the reason that he was removed from the family. Pedro gives the impression from his life story that he's lost his sense of identity. His identity was rooted in the military and the things that he did that, and then due to the type of injury that he suffered while he was in the military, he was quickly removed before he was prepared to leave. So I think he's having a little bit of identity crisis there. So the treatment plan that I outlined for him is kind of just a basic outline, uh, mainly because there's things that could be added to it, like his legal issues, occupational issues, family issues. But I can only do that if Pedro is motivated to work through those issues. And in order to find that out, I would have to sit down with him through like an initial interview and decide with him what he would like to work on and what he's willing to do. I'd also give him suggestions about maybe some problem areas that I'm seeing for him to consider and for him to make those decisions as we create his treatment plan. Ultimately, if he is counter motivated, anything that's placed in the treatment plan will not help him make any progress. So the treatment must be developed with his assistance and with his approval. That's just foremost and forthright. Also, in order to get him motivated for treatment, it would be my idea to use cognitive behavior therapy because of some of the distorted thinking that he's having. Also, it would be my opinion that motivational interviewing techniques would be very helpful to get him to move through the stages of change. Sounds to me like from the case study that he is in the contemplation stage of change, maybe in the pre-contemplation stage of change. He knows there's some things wrong, but he's not really ready to admit that. So helping him work through his ambivalence about moving from one stage of change into the other would probably help him very much. So what I did is I outlined a treatment plan like I would normally do on my job. So the beginning of my paper says the overall treatment focus. So this would be the findings from the report, from the self-report, and the assessment that would be given to us to kind of guide him through the treatment plan. So Pedro arrived to treatment for abusing alcohol. Pedro has developed a tolerance and has been unable to stop drinking on his own. Pedro was recently found passed out in his car after he had driven into a parked vehicle and landed in a ditch. He was transported to the hospital and he was charged with destruction of private property because he was under the influence of alcohol at the time of the accident. Pedro has been drinking on the job, in which he rationalized his behavior. Pedro is having some irrational thinking and behaviors that are unhealthy to him. Pedro has a strained relationship with his family and has been searching for a connection to others, only to end up isolating and drinking excessively on a nightly basis. Pedro has been abusing alcohol to avoid the way he feels. So then the next section of my paper says discharge criteria expected. Pedro will be educated on the 12 steps of recovery, relapse prevention, and be able to identify triggers and warning signs to prevent relapse. As evidenced by Pedro will have daily application of relapse prevention skills, utilize problem-solving skills, and thought-stopping techniques. Discharge criteria at a minimum would be Pedro will have knowledge of how the 12 steps work and how to apply them in his daily life, and how he will use new coping skills to make better decisions. Followed into that would be kind of a brief outline of his projected stay for residential treatment would be 30 to 45 days, and I don't remember if the case study said that he was going to do outpatient or inpatient, or if it even said. Either way, the first part of the plan would be the initial problem, which would be his alcohol, and it would be Pedro has been drinking excessive amounts of alcohol despite its negative consequences. A goal for him would be Pedro will gain an understanding of the severity of his drinking and recognize he needs to change. An objective for that would be Pedro will be educated on a 12-step program of recovery and incorporate these into his daily life. And a typical assignment probably for the first, for that section in the beginning would be Pedro will write his life story about his relationship with alcohol. Problem statement 2 would be Pedro struggles with irrational thinking and negative behaviors as a result of his alcohol use. The goal for that would be Pedro will acknowledge the extent of his emotional issues and how it contributes to his alcohol use. His objective for that would be Pedro will learn new healthy coping skills such as grounding techniques and thought redirection to decrease the impact of his daily stressors. And a typical assignment probably for that, a first assignment would be Pedro will write 10 emotional events in his life that have caused him to feel strong negative emotions. Also, problem statement for number 3 would be Pedro struggles to understand the need to maintain long-term sobriety. And so a goal would be Pedro will understand the necessity for a relapse prevention plan and aftercare plan. And then an objective would be Pedro will develop a personal recovery plan that includes a sponsor and a 12-step meetings. And the typical assignment for that would be Pedro will begin identifying his relapse triggers and warning signs by creating a list. So hopefully I've outlined everything that needs to be outlined in this minimal treatment plan. Now let me say one more time that given more time to work with him or speak with him, I would probably add investigate his family relationships, his occupational problems, and also his legal issues. Thank you for your time.